I find the exact words in the Facebook post, and it said, "I'm in a bad situation where I'm being pimped at his house. He won't let me leave." I jump up from my couch and I scream, "You are done, Joseph Hazley. You are done. This is everything we needed and then some."
Welcome to episode 371 of FBI Case File Review with Jerry Williams. I'm a retired agent on a mission to show you who the FBI is and what the FBI does through my books, my blog, and my podcast case reviews with former colleagues. Today, we get to speak to retired agent Carrie Landau, who served in the FBI for 21 years. In this episode, she reviews her sex trafficking investigation of the man who held 16-year-old Desiree Robinson against her will and trafficked her for sex on Backpage.com. Desiree was murdered by a man who answered the online advertisement. The trafficker was convicted and sentenced to 32 years in prison. The murderer was sentenced to 39 years in prison, and the man who introduced and sold Desiree to her trafficker was sentenced to 7 years in prison. Desiree's mother, Yvonne Ambrose, has dedicated her life to preventing and ending sex trafficking by bringing awareness to the dangers of modern-day slavery. You can learn more at Desiree Foundation Against Sex Trafficking. During retired agent Carrie Landau's bureau career, she specialized in crimes against children and human trafficking investigations. Carrie was stationed in Cleveland, Ohio, and Chicago, and was assigned to multiple Safe Street task forces that included investigating violent crime, gangs, and drugs. Carrie served as the Crimes Against Children coordinator for the entire FBI Chicago division for 6 years and for 19 years in the south suburbs of Chicago. Carrie was also the North Central team leader on the Child Abduction Rapid Deployment Team. Carrie has presented case studies, taught basic and advanced human trafficking classes, and been a keynote speaker for multiple national conventions. She is a qualified federal court expert witness on sex trafficking in the United States and has testified in that capacity over 14 times. Carrie is the recipient of the FBI's Medal of Excellence and the Heroes Award from the National Center of Missing and Exploited Children. Currently, Carrie is employed as a regional security manager for Ford Motor Company. She is also the founder of Landau and Associates, LLC, a professional investigative service agency partnering with local law firms, corporations, and select private clients. This is one of the most powerful shows I have ever recorded. I am honored that Carrie trusted me with her FBI story. Carrie has asked that I help her disseminate an email for human trafficking contacts about the Backpage.com and City X Guide Victims Fund, established to provide financial compensation for some former victims and survivors. You'll find links to the message in English and Spanish in your podcast app's description of this episode and in the show notes at jerrywilliams.com. Now, before we get to the case review, I've been invited to speak about the FBI in books, TV, and movies at the Wilmington University True Crime Series on November 11th. The event is open to the public. The link to register is on the homepage of my website, jerrywilliams.com. In your podcast app's description of this episode, there's a link to the show notes at jerrywilliams.com. You'll also find links to where you can join my reader team about crime fiction and the FBI in books, TV, and movies. Thank you for your support. Now here's the show. I want to welcome my guest, retired agent Carrie Landau. Hey, Carrie, how are you?
Hi, Jerry. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Well, no, I appreciate it because sex trafficking is a violation so important for us to work. And so when I was introduced to you, I was very, very excited to see that these are the type of cases that you work during your career. Can you tell us before we actually get into the case review, because you have a case that is well, there's no other word I could use but tragic to talk to us about. But tell us about the program and the violation itself and how you kind of fell into working these type of cases.
Sure. I had a couple of different professors that had brought in some guest speakers who had been involved in the life of prostitution and trafficking. I really took a liking to the violation itself even before getting into the FBI. I worked at a corrections facility for a period of time. While working at the corrections facility and working as a juvenile court liaison, in those experiences, I had come upon what at the time, of course, we just called prostitution, and minors even engaged in prostitution. We know now that's not the appropriate terminology because a juvenile cannot consent to this happening to them. As a child protective services worker and juvenile court liaison, I had multiple experiences dealing with victims. I knew once I got into the FBI, the main thing I wanted to focus on was helping children, helping victims become survivors, and finding a way to get them justice all at the same time.
Before I came into the FBI, I was a juvenile probation officer.
I did not know that.
And so I worked these cases too. And we did call my clients who were 14 and 15, we did call them prostitutes. And I, of course, have evolved and know that they were being trafficked by their quote unquote boyfriends at the time. But here they were being sent away to reform schools and group homes and placement centers when they were really victims.
I learned that victims of trafficking felt trapped, and I felt like it was a passion and a mission of mine of personal nature that I could relate to the victims. I was involved in a not so great relationship and was married to an individual who made me feel trapped. Although I had not been trafficked, it was very reminiscent of domestic violence. He had told me if I left him, I would never amount to anything. That was something that became my driving force in me moving forward.
Carrie, I have to tell you that I understand why you are so successful as an agent working these type of cases. Your transparency, your honesty, your vulnerability is just so amazing. I am tearing up here.
Thank you for that.
Wow. I don't know what to do. I want to stand up and applaud or hug you or whatever.
Thank you. I appreciate that so much. It was so difficult to overcome that. There's so many people that go through that don't have family the way that I did. My sister and my brother-in-law took me in and convinced me that I was worth it. And when I went to the academy, I just knew that one way or another I had to succeed. Looking back on those times drove me during my entire 21-year career of I owed it to myself and I owed it to all the kids who don't think they're worth it to fight. That's what made this work. I felt like also I got a lot of advice from different people throughout my career who said, don't share too much of your personal experience with victims. And, you need to be stoic and stellar and you need to be strong for them. But I tried really hard not to cry in front of them. In this case review, I'll tell you, I did cry with this mother time and time again because it was so awful. But I think they appreciated that. And I've had so many victim survivors tell me, Carrie, if you wouldn't have shared what happened to you, we weren't sure if we should trust you. And you being vulnerable with us made us feel like we weren't alone. I think that really helped me and helped me process what happened also to me, as crazy as that sounds. Knowing how strong these young girls can be coming forward and facing their accuser, it's the ultimate sacrifice that they give of their soul to tell about their most vulnerable and exploited moments. I just feel so honored to have been able to work for the FBI for 21 years and help with that.
Absolutely. And I don't understand anyone who would criticize your own investigative interviewing knowledge, expertise, experience in order to get what you need from your victim survivor witnesses. Obviously, because of the success of the work that you did, you knew what you were doing and you did the right thing.
Thank you so much. Thank you. As a former agent, you evolve over time and you learn what not to do and what works for you. And I was never an agent that yelled and screamed at anyone or had an intimidating stature, 5'3", and it didn't work for me. There were so many agents that would say, you need to tell them that they're going to prison and they're doing this. And I'm like, I don't know. I get a lot more with these traffickers with sugar than salt. And because of the egotistical nature of most of these traffickers and believing that the victims won't come forward, they thought they could blow smoke to me as well. And I loved when they would do that because they literally would confess and not even know it. That was my favorite part of these cases, was working with the victims and then eventually being able to arrest the trafficker and let them know that these women were strong enough and that they did not break them and that they now have justice. When they would come to court and testify, it was amazing to see the transformation as they walked in and scared and walked out and felt redeemed, invincible, and that the prosecutors believed them.
Wow. All right. So you have definitely primed us for this case review that we're going to talk about today. I'm going to warn everyone that it is one of the most tragic sex trafficking cases that you'll ever hear about. Listening and learning about it makes you sad, but also makes you very, very angry.
Yes.
So, Carrie, where do you want to start?
I think I'll just start at the beginning of how we got knowledge of this case. I was on my way to a wedding for my brother-in-law. It was Christmas time. It was Christmas Eve morning. We had just provided, my partner and I had the same partner in the FBI for 16 years. There was a little bit of a break where he did a 18-month stint in DC, but I had him for 16 years and we worked all sex trafficking cases together. We had a very unique bond. I would say more like brother and sister. He's just an incredible human, and these victim survivors really took to him at times too. I had a female partner before who was fantastic as well. It was just a really cool dynamic to see how sometimes the victim survivors would navigate to the females and sometimes to the males. My partner of 16 years, Mike Barker, was at the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children for his temporary duty assignment at the time that this case came in. So I had a temporary partner, Jonathan Williamson, who had worked crimes against children his entire career, who stepped in and took Mike Barker's place while he was on the TDY. It was one of those times where you think, oh my gosh, I have so much stuff on my plate already. I'm continuing to work these cases with my partner now in DC, and knowing that all of these cases were still coming in. We were in a unique situation because I was stationed at the South Resident Agency in Chicago. Much of what we did was going from police department to train them on the dynamics of sex trafficking. So many police departments in this area of responsibility have limited and finite resources. They may not have enough detectives, or they don't have the training. So much of what my partner and I did was go out, and it was I call it a vicious cycle too, because it was training 4 or 5 detectives, and then they get promoted and they move on to sergeant and they go back to the street. So we're constantly training and retraining. In this situation, about 2 months before this, we had trained officers from the South Suburban Major Crimes Task Force and the Lansing Police Department. We had put on just a small training about what to look for in trafficking, how they can report it to us, and how we could partner together to work a case if one ever comes up in their area. Interestingly, I'm on my way to a wedding of my brother-in-law, and I'm with my husband, who's also an FBI agent, Tim Batcha, and my daughter. We are on our way to Youngstown, Ohio, which is going to become part of this story. So many ironic things that happened in this case, which leads me to believe I was meant to work this case. We are on our way to Youngstown, Ohio, and I get the call from one of the officers I had trained 2 months prior. He says, Carrie, I don't know what we have right now, but we have a bad situation going on. We have what we believe is a young female who is laying in a pool of blood on the ground in a garage in Markham. She is deceased. We have what we believe is possible homicide involving trafficking. And I said, how do you know? What makes you say that? He tells me the following. He says, there is a condom outside of the car. There is an individual here of a very large stature who has been knocking on this door. He is saying that this is his friend and she was at a party, but now she is in this garage in a pool of blood. The South Suburban Major Crimes Task Force has been deployed. We are all here. I have been asked not to call you, but I'm calling you because I think you need to get here. Long and short, I don't go until the next day because I attend the wedding of my brother-in-law and I come back home. My husband, knowing full well that this is super important to me and my calling and my purpose and all of those things, he agrees, let's just go to the wedding and we will go back to Chicago the next day. We come back to Chicago, and this will come full circle in just a moment. But my daughter at the time is 9 years old. She still believes in Santa Claus. She wanted a normal Christmas. And so it's Christmas Day, and I am gone and I am working a homicide and a trafficking investigation. And I am nowhere to be found for at least 2.5 weeks. And I say that because I think a lot of us forget sometimes that there are other people involved in these cases and you get such a focus, but how much it affects them and how much my daughter and my husband have given up for me to have this career. So I had ordered some Christmas presents and not all of them had arrived. I bring this up because one of the Christmas presents that arrived and I opened when I was changing my clothes and getting ready to go out to the scene was a sign that I ordered that said, "Be the change you wish to see in the world." That will come full circle here shortly. This investigation takes off almost immediately, but South Suburban Major Crimes is working the homicide. They're very nervous about the involvement of the FBI, not because they don't play well with others and not because they aren't dedicated to figuring exactly what happened with Desiree, but they are so nervous about their one and only witness being who we will learn is actually Desiree's trafficker. As I continue talking about this case, what is really important to note as well, and at the beginning and onset of this case, is I have a prosecutor that I had worked many cases with, Christopher Parenti. He is currently no longer with the United States Attorney's Office, but the best prosecutor I have ever worked with in my life. I called him on his personal cell phone and I said, "Chris, what are you doing?" And he's like, "Well, what everyone is doing. I am preparing for Christmas. What do you have going on?" And I said, "I need your help." And he said, "What do you got?" I said, "I have what appears to be a missing girl who is deceased on a garage floor and has been murdered. And this looks like sex trafficking." He says, "How does it look like sex trafficking?" I then proceed to tell him that they are able to get the phone from Desiree that was left behind in the garage, and they find a Backpage.com advertisement. And we know that young girls are being trafficked on Backpage.com. When I tell him that, he says, "I will head to the office now. Tell me what you need. I will start pounding out paper." So this is Christmas morning. And you know as well as I do, there are different levels of dedication with not just agents, but prosecutors and people involved in these cases. And the fact that that prosecutor said to me, he had young boys at the time, and he's like, "Carrie, I will head to my office now. I will start pounding out paper." That just shows his level of dedication, which you'll see throughout this case presentation. I arrive on scene. I am told by Chris, our prosecutor, do not investigate in any way the homicide. Focus only on the sex trafficking aspect of this. Do not talk to the one and only witness who may be her trafficker. Do not ask for any reports. Go there and assess what you can assess, and then we'll go from there. It was the best piece of advice he could have given to me at that time because I go all in and head first. Had I done that, I probably would have been in a position where I would have been walled off from the case of the sex trafficking part because I would have had knowledge about the entirety of the homicide and the sex trafficking, which we can get to later. When the officers called me initially, they said, Carrie, we need to know if you have any missing light-skinned African-American girls who may be from Chicago, and this is her phone number. And I'm like, okay, so I start the whole entire way to Ohio to my brother-in-law's wedding. I am on the phone with everyone I can think of. Department of Children and Family Services, Chicago PD, Backpage.com. My partner, who was in DC at the time, is working for National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, and he is working on a project that is going to be a web crawler for advertisements online. And I give him the advertisement that Desiree was posted on and that was found on her phone. We are able then to identify her as Desiree Robinson.
So she had no identification on her?
She had no identification on her. The individual, which we'll later learn to know as Joseph Hazley, her trafficker, was able to say her full name to the police, but I wanted to fully identify her in my own way. My partner was able to use that web crawling tool to identify other advertisements. And then the phone number was attributable to different things that we were able to link together to say, yes, this is in fact Desiree. The unfortunate part of this case and the very sad part of this case, and we know now as law enforcement officers through training and experience that when you give a death notification to a family, you go to their home. Yvonne Ambrose, Desiree Robinson's mother, received a death notification over the phone from Chicago Police Department in this case. She was kept in the dark. She was not given information because, as you know, there's limited information that we can give to outside people outside of law enforcement, including parents. She went to the morgue to identify her daughter positively, and on her daughter's arm is the first time she ever sees that her daughter has a tattoo, and the tattoo says, "Be the change you wish to see in the world." It's the same saying that the Christmas gift that I purchased for my daughter that arrived on the day that I was getting dressed to go and investigate this.
Wow. Chills.
Chills. And there are so many more with this case. Yvonne Ambrose identifies her daughter, has no idea what could have happened. This is a very normal situation, teenage girl, 16-year-old who's experiencing things that all 16-year-old girls experience. Some difficulties at home, dreams and aspirations, parents who are divorced, mom in a new relationship, grandparents who are assisting in helping to raise her, but a very, very loving family, all who love Desiree, all who believed that one day she would be in the Air Force. That was her dream, that she was this incredible dancer. She loved Hello Kitty. She was just a ray of sunshine. And I've watched so many videos of her and seen so many photos that I wish I could have met her. But I've been so lucky to get to know her family and her mom. I partner with her mom on presenting this case. It just so happens that her mother's sister, Tiffany, lives in my same neighborhood. Another ironic part of this case. Yvonne was from Chicago, and 3.5 blocks from my house is where Yvonne spent many days and many weekends, and I never knew Yvonne until this case. What I will say about this is it starts like this and it's bumpy and it's really tough to coordinate efforts with local law enforcement. Generally, we're called in and it is a very seamless partnership, especially because of the relationships that we had established in the South Resident Agency. It is bumpy because state's attorneys and federal prosecutors are concerned about their aspects of the case and don't want to mess either one of them up. And it wouldn't have been malicious in any way. It's just, what are the rules of evidence? What are the ways in which we're going to focus on prosecuting this? And how can we ensure that all parties have a fair shot at what they're going after? I was really lucky because I had a super good relationship with the South Suburban Major Crimes Task Force. They were able to pave the way with the local police department that I was working with on this case to say, like, look, we have to work with Carrie. We have to work with her team. We have to work with the FBI. John and I established a very good relationship right away, but there were scares and questions. And I know I'm focusing a lot on that, but that's what made it really hard the first few days to get this rolling. We had to give a voice to a deceased person. In trafficking cases, you generally have a victim to talk to say, okay, so tell me what happened. How did you get here? All we had here was one witness who says he knows this girl. He brings Desiree to this address in Markham, Illinois, to service a client that called Backpage.com during a party that they were having in this garage. She services the client once and is paid. They leave and she services another client elsewhere. She gets called again at about 2 a.m. by the same client from the first encounter at the party, and that ends up being Anthony Rosales. When she returns to a drunken, high, crazed individual who likely could not perform the first time, although we'll never know, and so now has the gumption to do so. He has no money to pay her. Joseph Hazley waits outside with another female, and he promptly falls asleep. He's the security for Desiree, the trafficker who's there to protect her, who is 6'6" and 240 pounds. And he is, by all accounts, telling Desiree, I am here for you. I'm going to watch you. I'll have your back. He doesn't. He falls asleep. And what happens next in that garage is Desiree fights for her life by way of evidence related to what was collected there. Her dress is pulled up in a way that appears to have been an attempted sexual assault. She is beaten over the head with a pole bender in the garage by this individual. And she, what we learn later, years later, time later, as we could not watch the interrogation of the murder suspect, is that essentially he had no money. Desiree said, I can't go back to my friend and tell him I have no money. He didn't understand that at the time. He doesn't remember much, but blacks out and knows that he had a knife in his hand and he slit her from ear to ear. And she laid in a pool of blood until Joseph Hazley awoke. He knocked on the door. Nobody answered. Finally, the wife of the individual who had the party answers the door. They both go to the garage because he says, I know she must be in there because I just called the phone. And it rang. That's how I knew to go to the door. And she said, where's the phone now? Joseph had gone in on Desiree's cold, bloody, bludgeoned, sliced, hanging on from one small vertebrae of her head, and takes the only evidence, the cell phone, and sticks it in the side pocket of his vehicle. And it wasn't enough that he misguided her. It wasn't enough that he sold her. It wasn't enough that he purchased her from another individual for $250. He removed what he believed was the only evidence, a cell phone that he provided to Desiree that had the evidence of trafficking upon it. He tries immediately to leave the scene. The homeowner calls 911, and the homeowner is able to get Markham police. A female officer comes to the house and blocks Joseph Hazley in, and so he cannot leave. And the Markham police officer had the wherewithal to go in and see Desiree after she blocked in Joseph Hazley in the driveway and says, you're going nowhere. I want her phone. She gets the phone, and it's the only evidence we had to corroborate everything we knew to be true, which is that cell phone. It was incredible work by that female officer that led us on a journey of a year and a half of investigation that brought justice to Desiree Robinson, Yvonne Ambrose, and their family. But for that officer, I don't know that I'm talking to you today about this case. It just goes to show you that the training and the experience and for me, the godlike nature of this case and how it all came together. The ability for that officer to know this is a child laying on the floor. She testified at court saying her hands, her features appeared to be that of a child. She didn't look like she looks in every picture that we'll see. She was bludgeoned. Her face was swollen. Decompensation had set in 4 short hours. This is at 6 in the morning when this discovery happens on Christmas Eve morning. A few hours later, Yvonne Ambrose is identifying her in a morgue. At the time, I called my partner. When I got back, he and I met up. My partner that was my partner for a little bit, John Williamson, we live in the same area. And so he picked me up and we knew we were going to be gone for the long haul. When we arrived on scene, it was incredible how much effort was being put towards this. But we almost had our own investigation going and we're kind of, like I said, siloed off. As I go on, I will tell you that we learned that Yvonne Ambrose is the mother to Desiree. I make a phone call to Yvonne Ambrose a few days later. I don't want to call her immediately. I don't want to overwhelm her. I want to give her time to grieve, but I know that I have to advise her that we're investigating this and that we believe that this is sex trafficking and I need her help and I need information because we have to give this young lady a voice.
At the time, was Desiree a runaway? Was she missing? Or was she doing this while still living with relatives and nobody knew that she was involved in this?
Yeah, that's important to note. So she was actually living with her paternal grandparents for a brief period of time. I don't have all of the facts related to what was really going on. I know Yvonne had a new boyfriend. She would eventually marry him. Desiree wasn't a big fan. There was just a lot of maybe disagreements within the family. Desiree also has a father. I didn't have much interaction with him. He came to our first meeting that I'll talk about in a minute, and then that kind of slipped off a little bit. So most of my time and learning about Desiree was through her mother and her advocacy for victims now. She was listed as missing, allegedly. I say that because I never received a copy of the NCIC report that listed her as missing. Our understanding is that she was at one point listed as missing. That became problematic because when I was looking into what kids do I have currently missing, I would get every single flyer, every single report of missing kids in the South suburbs and in Chicago. At the time, I was the Crimes Against Children coordinator. So I printed them out. I had them in a book at my desk. I would take pictures with my cell phone and keep them in my phone. So even when the Lansing police officer called me, I looked through all those photos. I called Department of Children and Family Services. I called Chicago PD. There was nobody that matched the description of Desiree as being missing. What we later learned is that she at one point had been listed, which there should have been a record of it, but they couldn't get it to populate, which again, I don't think she was listed as missing. And that somebody cleaned house and just, I don't want to make allegations that I don't know are true, but I don't believe that they did their due diligence in locating Desiree when she was reported missing. For 24 days, Yvonne Ambrose did not have consistent contact with her daughter. For 24 days, we believe Desiree was trafficked. Desiree met a young man online named Charles McPhee. Charles McPhee ran around with Joseph Hazley. Charles McPhee knew all good and well that Joseph Hazley was trafficking young women, was partying with young women at his apartment in Chicago. And at one point in time, Joseph Hazley says to Charles McPhee, if you ever come across a good female, bring her to me. Ultimately, Charles McPhee tried to traffic Desiree on his own. Charles McPhee is less than intelligent individual, less than cooperative when it was all said and done, but he finally admitted that he sold Desiree Robinson to Joseph Hazley for $250. He testified at trial. He told us that, but it took a long time for him to get to that point. I was pretty frustrated with Charles and his lack of admission, knowing what ultimately happened to Desiree, but for Charles introducing her to Joseph. On or about December 6th of 2016, Charles McPhee introduces Desiree Robinson to Joseph Hazley at a party. Desiree Robinson never, ever leaves Joseph Hazley's control and oversight again. And ultimately, she attends a party with Charles, and the exchange of, I'll pay you $250 for her, he leaves her behind. During her time with Joseph, other girls were being trafficked. I mentioned that I had reached out to my 16-year partner, Mike Barker, at National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, asked him to run these ads. He was able to locate other advertisements. Once we had access to Desiree's phone, which was problematic initially, they wanted to keep that phone for just the homicide investigation. We were able to convince the South Suburban Major Crimes Task Force that we needed at least a copy of the phone dump from Celebrite to be able to analyze who she was talking to and connect the dots with the clients and Joseph and all of the parties involved. We were able to get that phone dump and determine that there were several other girls that Joseph was trafficking, and he was living this party lifestyle. He portrayed himself as a security guard, and he had a FOID card so he could carry a gun. He had this just overwhelming stature. When we arrested him, I thought to myself, I am 5'3". He is 6'6". He is a foot and 3 inches taller than me. Desiree was 5'2". He was a foot and 4 inches taller than Desiree. His stature alone was intimidating, and he used that to his own benefit to traffic multiple women and to have this control over Desiree. What we learned about her time with him is essentially she had never participated in anything like this. She was with Charles and thought Charles McPhee and her were maybe boyfriend, girlfriend. It didn't work out. He tried to take her to a date and she's like, "What is this? Don't do this to me." It was very strange how this happened, but she was enamored by Joseph Hazley and this party lifestyle. She was having difficulties at home. She knew that it was kind of fun over there, and she started very quickly, first day, having sex with Joseph Hazley. She replaced a girl that we'll talk about, Cheyenne Swiger. She replaced Cheyenne, and Cheyenne, by way of what traffickers do, was forced to watch Joseph have sex with Desiree. Cheyenne became the outcast because the younger the better, according to traffickers. These are their words, not mine. The less experienced, the better. You can keep them in line. You can train them. They are a great commodity because of the way in which their body is shaped and the satisfaction for men related to sexual activity. It was no different with Joseph. He controlled her every move. He convinced her that they were going to have a life together, and she bought in. Once she bought in, it was too late. And he told her things like, "You're never going to amount to anything." Same thing that I was told. "You leave me and it's over for you. No one will believe you. No one will believe that I did this to you. You're the one prostituting." All of the things that traffickers tell people to get them to stay. Desiree reaches out at one point in time. This is the most heartbreaking part of the case, in my opinion. She reaches out to a friend. She gets a moment where she has access to Facebook. She has a Facebook account, and she reaches out to her friend who she roller skated with during her youth years leading up to this, and he was a very good friend to her. When she reaches out to him, she says words to the effect of, "I need help. I'm in a bad situation. I'm being trafficked." When she says this to him, he responds, but she has such a limited time and window of opportunity where Joseph is not watching over her and is not in control of her, that she and his name was Tabaje communicate briefly. We learn of this communication through the family. I want to back up just a minute and tell you about bringing in Yvonne Ambrose's family to the family meeting to get us this far in the case. I'm going to come back to Tabaje because that will prove what we need as FBI agents to corroborate, especially a deceased victim. So I reach out to Yvonne. She remembers it a little differently than I do, but she said, "I just remember this sweet voice on the phone saying, 'My name is Carrie, and I believe your daughter has been trafficked. I know that you're going through a hard time right now, but I really need your help in investigating this. I can't make any promises to you, but we would like to meet with you and your family to see if you have any information that could help us piece this together.'" She said, where and when. There was no hesitation. I said, we'd like you to come to the FBI office tomorrow, if at all possible, and bring anything that you think can help us. Not only did Yvonne come, she invited Desiree's father. They were not together anymore. She invited Desiree's grandparents on both sides. She invited every aunt and uncle. We had 27 people that came to the FBI office to give us information about Desiree.
I had to stop you because these are 27 people who loved and cared for her, and it's not what you expect when you hear about a missing child that's a victim of trafficking.
Absolutely. And I tell you, when Yvonne didn't tell me how many people were coming, she just said, we'll be there. And when she said, we'll be there, I got the conference room that had 7 chairs. I took all of the chairs out of our break room at the RA. I took all of the chairs anywhere I could find in the RA and put them in the conference room. And we still only had 24 chairs. Desiree had an aunt who had a stroke and was in a wheelchair who came to the meeting. Grandparents who had so much information. And the meeting lasted 4.5 hours where we just gathered photos, we gathered phone numbers, we gathered information that helped us to corroborate what we knew to be true, but we needed their help. There was not a day, an hour, a moment where Yvonne Ambrose did not call me back, text me back, provide me with whatever I asked her to, up and until this very moment today. She and I have maintained a relationship going on now almost 10 years, where I go to her family events. She comes to mine. We present together. She is my friend. She came to watch my daughter play softball. I say all of that to say that the success of this case rests on the shoulders of a mother who lost her child. And she was so strong and so brave. And every day I hope I can be the mom to my daughter that Yvonne was to Desiree and still is to Desiree. And although she lost her and she's no longer here on earth, she fights every day for her and does it through so many different avenues. I can't even tell you, and we'll get to that. But what they provided was Tabaje's name to us, and they provided that along with so much other information. When they mentioned Tabaje, I thought, okay, how am I going to find this kid? Well, she had the mother's phone number and the address, all of those things of like, we've got to go talk to all these friends. We've got to find out who knew where she was. And you know, as well as I do, you have all this information coming in. But at the time, this is just one case. I'm getting ready to go to trial on 2 other cases with the same prosecutor. Trying to juggle all of this and juggle your own life, but becoming obsessed with finding out and getting justice for this one family, it became all consuming. My family became friends with their family because we were together so much, and I spent so much time with them, knowing that Yvonne's sister lived in my neighborhood, and that when she came to help us, that she was going to stay with her sister. She was so close by. I mean, it was just incredible. So we know Desiree had Facebook. We know that she reached out to Tabaje. Tabaje was so upset about Desiree's death that he reaches out to Yvonne, and Yvonne gives us his name. And when we go initially to interview him, he is sobbing and crying. And his mother says, you tell the FBI everything you've told me, and you get justice for Desiree. Tabaje proceeds to tell us that he deleted his Facebook messages with Desiree out of guilt. He was so upset that he didn't help her or couldn't help her or didn't know how to help her. He says it was only a few messages, and when he went to message her back and figure out where she was, the communication stopped. And that was on or about December 8th, 9th. So she had been with him for about 3 days and is reaching out to her good friend saying, you got to help me. You got to get me out of here. I'm in a bad situation. I'm being pimped. Those were her words. We were like, oh my goodness, is Facebook going to have these records? We know that they're not on Desiree's phone and they're not with Tabaje anymore. We do a search warrant for Facebook. Please, are they going to have these records? This was one of the most important interviews that we did, and the most important information that we received from Desiree's mom was, you've got to talk to this kid. So I am at home with a sick daughter. 4 months after we send the search warrant out, we get it back. It took some time. Desiree was pretty involved on Facebook and had a ton of friends. Nothing inappropriate, just funny stuff, Hello Kitty stuff, funny little memes to her friends on Facebook. During that time, we had several ways that we could search Facebook, but the best way was to hand search the pages. To this moment, I'm sure my boss wants to have a conversation with me about how much money I spent on the printout of Desiree's Facebook search warrant return because it was over 16,000 pages. But I could not find the words that Tabaje said she used, and he paraphrased, but he said, I know she said I'm being pimped. We searched it analytically with a program called Palantir. We searched it in other different ways, and we could not find it. At the time, the way that Facebook gave us back our search warrant returns is ancient compared to how they do it now. I brought it home, 16,000 pages, and I thought I'll just do a few pages a night. I'll do a few pages until I can find this and hope it's in here. My daughter was homesick. She was upstairs in her bed. Again, she was 9 years old. I was downstairs. It was 5:30 in the morning. I will never forget it. She wasn't going to go to school that day because she was not feeling well. I'm hand searching Facebook using a highlighter of things I want to go back and talk to different people I'm learning about. I jump up from my seat and I find the exact words to Tabaje in the Facebook post. And it said, I'm in a bad situation. I'm in a situation where I'm being pimped at his house on 63rd and Racine. He won't let me leave. This is December 15th of 2016. And Tabaja said essentially those words. And after this, I jump up from my couch and I scream, you are done, Joseph Hazley. You are done. This is it. This is everything we needed and then some. I take that message. I have the IP address associated with that message. I match it up with Comcast records that we have. And the Comcast records are for a stagnant IP address associated to Joseph Hazley at 63rd and Racine in Chicago, Illinois. When this happens, I call my prosecutor and I said, I'm going to send you something right now. And this changes the trajectory of this case. I've never heard him like that. He was so ecstatic because we knew now that what she was saying, we brought life to a deceased victim by her words that were preserved when we did a preservation letter to Facebook, asking them to hold those records the day that we got the call that we believed this is who she was. And I give all the credit in the world to John Williamson and Mike Barker in that because they did that. They made sure that we had everything that we could place together. We couldn't get the phone right away. So they're like, what other records can we preserve? They handled that part of the investigation. Now, Mike Barker is gone at the time. He's in DC, like I mentioned, but he is doing work on this case, knowing full well he's not supposed to be, meaning he has another job to do there. But because of his dedication and his belief, he's a very godly man, belief about how important this mission is and this work is, he continued to work his job during the day and work this at night and call me every single night and say, this is what I found. This is what I've got. You guys got to talk to this person. Here's another girl. Here's another victim we believe. Here's this. All while John and I are working all of the other cases back in Chicago, plus this one, working with our prosecutor, putting it all together. Hours and hours of interviews. I interviewed one of Desiree's best friends for 9 hours while she got her hair braided at a cute little braid shop. And she was a wealth of information. At the end of the day, we are able to corroborate the sale of Desiree. An individual by the name of Raphael McClinton assisted Joseph in returning after Joseph gives his statements to law enforcement about Rosales and the murder and what he saw or didn't see. They returned to his house at 63rd and Racine and tried to dispose of any remaining memory of Desiree. It's not enough that he took the cell phone and attempted to get away with that. He now returns home and he takes her hair weaves and he takes her hairbrush and he takes her shoes that he purchased for her. Any glimpse of Desiree, he removes from the apartment and throws it in a trash bag the same way that he discarded her, sending her into the garage to perform sex not once with the individual, but twice while he promptly fell asleep and did his own thing. He goes home with Raphael. They remove what they think is everything, but what they don't know is that at the FBI, we have forensic analytical tools that were able to determine that those back page ads were made at his home in the dresses that he allowed other girls to wear, and now Desiree is wearing them, that he created those back page ads and placed them on his computer, and he went through and attempted to delete all those files. But John Williamson, FBI Chicago, is able to find pieces of those puzzles, puts them together, and dissects it all in a way to say, we know 100% sure that that computer had advertisements of Desiree Robinson on it. We know 100% that Desiree Robinson was trafficked in this house because Joseph walked down to the corner store and put his debit card into a machine to buy Bitcoin for those same advertisements. We are able to do surveillance and determine that, yes, that is in fact where Joseph lives. We're watching Joseph. We interview victims who tell us, please don't tell Joseph I'm cooperating. Please don't tell him, he will kill me. He has beaten me so many times. Do not tell him. They go home. They're so afraid that they go back and they tell him, I just talked to the FBI. I just told the FBI about what you've been doing. And he is so brazen and so bold that he puts a Facebook message on his Facebook page knowing that we're surveilling him on June 21st of 2017, 6 months later, and says, they say the Fed's watching, not worried, flipping off the camera. He puts this on his Facebook page, and I had a tickler on his Facebook page so I would be notified when he posted. And I screen capture it and I send it to my prosecutor, and he said, this is unbelievable. Days later, we're able to arrest him. We do the search warrant at the house. We find evidence of a hat that was worn by Joseph and then also by Desiree, a picture that we found on her phone of this hat with a big watch on it. It's a very distinct hat. Not sure if I sent that one to you.
Yes, I do have that photo and all of the other photos that I'm going to put in the show notes for this episode because people are hearing about Desiree. I want them to also see her and really get to know who she was.
Yes, that's so important. And it's so important to see the pictures of her dressed up as Joseph wanted her to be dressed, as looking like a young woman versus a 16-year-old compared to her in her Hello Kitty outfit, which is what she was days before being sold to Joseph Hazley. It sounds like, based on interviews that we had, that Desiree was not enjoying the sexual experiences that she was having with Joseph and that they were pretty forced and that she cried a lot during that time. I guess I mention that because there's such a myth out there, and I struggled with my own squad when I first started working these investigations. It's sad to say it, but law enforcement officers that believed, because they didn't have the training and the experience, that these girls want to be out there doing this and that they are putting themselves in these situations. I had people I really enjoyed working with say words to the effect to me of, why do you waste your time with this? Why do you spend all night and all weekend in these hotels? Why? They look at them. They want to be there. You can see in one of the pictures of Desiree that she is sad and that she is upset and that she is embarrassed, but is taking what appears to be a directed, sexy photo to make money. Last I checked, slavery was abolished, but in these instances, it's modern day slavery that's just more common than anyone knows because of the acceptance of the selling of human beings and the demand for it. I will say that the corroboration, the team effort, I haven't mentioned yet, but during the course of this investigation, we're approached by civil attorneys Yvonne, I won't get into that too much, but she has some civil attorneys that it was a difficult balance with like providing them information, providing the state's attorney's office information related to the sex trafficking that we learn about parts of the murder. Chris, our prosecutor, navigated all of that so eloquently. Not only that, we developed such a strong bond and friendship and relationship with the civil attorneys, which is really unusual for the FBI to have that close relationship. But it was because of what they're doing and their advocacy in fighting for sex trafficking victims, along with Yvonne in her efforts, that change was affected because of Desiree. So the very tattoo that she received, the very sign that my daughter received, be the change you wish to see in the world. We used to call our presentation Operation Team Player. Joseph Hazley's whole mantra was, if you want to be a team player, come with me. I have a good team. I'm the A team. We'll make money. We'll hustle. We'll do this. And Yvonne asked us a few years back if we could change the name of our presentation to BTC, Operation Be the Change. She said, if I don't have my daughter anymore and I had to give her up to God and I had to let her go, I have to have a way forward. And the way forward is to tell people this incredibly tragic story so that it doesn't happen to someone else. In doing so, Yvonne has given herself a lot of, I guess I would call it grief therapy. She's given herself a moment of clarity to be able to help others. She works with National Center for Missing and Exploited Children with mothers and affecting change. The civil attorneys were able to push forward legislation that President Trump was able to sign in 2018 for the FOSTA-SESTA law so that we can hold companies accountable who are selling children online for sex. .com companies. The FOSTA-SESTA law was enacted in 2018 when Backpage.com was taken down. Yvonne was able to meet President Trump, sign that law at the White House with her son, and we forget about the people that these cases affect. Desiree had a young brother who lost his sister to this. He was able to go to the White House and be a part of this change. I'm so proud of this case, mostly because when I first got the call, I thought, there is no way I am going to be able to piece this together because we were up against so much. And yet we were resilient, dedicated, and driven, all of those things. But what we had was the blessing of a mother and a family who cared about this girl. And there's so many people out there that think victims of human trafficking are throwaways and are not loved. Yes, there are some young women and men who are addicted to drugs and who have been a part of a system that has hurt them and hurt people. And so it becomes cyclical. I have a lot of strong feelings about that because we're all human beings. When you turn a blind eye to this, or you accept it, or you are okay with it, you're just encouraging the next trafficker. We all have nieces and nephews, if you don't have your own children, that somebody in your life is going to be affected by this. I don't want that. I hope we can eradicate trafficking. I don't know that we will. The demand is always going to be there. It's like drugs.
Supply and demand.
Supply and demand, yes. We were able to get justice for Desiree during the course of the trial. Tabijah was so heartbroken about the loss of his friend and his inability to save her that he was terrified to come to court to testify. Thank goodness he did, because he's the only person who could authenticate the Facebook records and say that, yes, that is what Desiree sent to me. Yes, those are my responses. Yes, this is how this went down, because Desiree couldn't. Yvonne's entire family came. On the day of sentencing, Yvonne wore the dress that she wore to Desiree's funeral. I can't even imagine what that felt like, putting that dress back on. She hugged and thanked every single witness that testified in that case, even Charles McPhee, who sold Desiree for $250, the other victims who came forward. She thanked them. She thanked them for giving their daughter a voice. She thanked Charles McPhee for being strong enough to come forward. She thanked every single person, and she did it with grace and poise. I heard something yesterday that reminded me of Yvonne, and it was, you have to have the ability to forgive, but forgiving someone doesn't mean that you still don't fight for justice. She was able to forgive. She gave the most incredible victim impact statement I have ever heard. When she speaks at presentations, people line up outside to talk to her and to hear her. I tease her that I feel like when we get done presenting, she is a celebrity and she needs bodyguards. It's incredible what she has accomplished by way of being that change that Desiree wanted. She didn't know that Desiree had gotten a tattoo. And she said, how incredible is that people think that my daughter must not have been loved and must have been a throwaway child and must have been this. But the opportunity that she has when she leaves home and is missing or a little wayward or not around all the time, that the tattoo she chose was be the change you wish to see in the world. It's who she was. Her grandmother, I think, died of a broken heart, to be honest. These cases had not resolved themselves yet, and her grandma died. Her grandma was just an incredible person who helped us throughout the whole investigation. I will tell a quick story. Yvonne does not live in this area anymore, and my daughter and I traveled for her softball team. Yvonne came to the softball games. They happened to be in the evening. It's a beautiful, beautiful evening, full moon in center field. My daughter had never hit a home run before. Yvonne was sitting next to me, and Yvonne said, "You got this, Mackenzie. You got this. Take a deep breath. Do it for Desi." She hit a home run to center field as if it was going into the moon. She got up a second time, and Yvonne said, "Take a deep breath, Mackenzie. Desi's got you. Desi's watching you." And my daughter hit a second home run. You can't make this up. This is not fake. This is not for a podcast. This is not for the movies. This was meant to be how it all happened. I was in the right place at the right time. Yvonne was in the right place at the right time. And although this is so tragic, I made a friend for life. We trauma bonded through this, which is so sad and awful. But I will fight anyone who says anything about Yvonne or about her parenting or about victims of human trafficking whose parents don't care about them. I've never seen anything like this. People are generally afraid when the FBI comes to their house, and they welcomed us into their home, not only on the clock, but off the clock. We have become family. I will tell you the one caveat to the happiness of this story is Cheyenne, who, again, the ironic nature of this case. Cheyenne and Gina were both victims from Youngstown, Ohio. At the beginning of this podcast, I talked about going to a wedding in Youngstown, Ohio. My husband is from Youngstown, Ohio. We found Cheyenne and Gina in Youngstown, Ohio. That's where they were from. All of the connections, the ability that I had, the connections with the Cleveland FBI office. I can't say enough about them. They helped us tremendously in this case because we in the FBI have tentacles everywhere. We needed help in locating these other victims. I reached out to my very good friend, Jen Myers, who's the best victim specialist I have ever worked with, who helped me to locate these girls with another victim specialist. It just all came together. It's like I was in the Cleveland office. I knew all of those people. I married my husband from Youngstown. I had the connections there. It was like that moment of doubt that I had when my applicant coordinator called to say, "You made it into the FBI." And when he said, "What, did you not think like you were good enough?" All of that went away during this case. And it all went away because I knew that if we could give a voice to Desiree, we could literally do anything. We did it and then some. Not only was Joseph Hazley convicted and sent to federal prison for 32 years, Anthony Rosales was also convicted and sentenced to 38 years for her murder years later. We are now working on the civil piece. I am partnering with the law firm that is helping to do that. We are helping to get victims money that is due to them from the Backpage.com case. If they are eligible, I'm working with them on that. We're still fighting for Desiree. Again, it's going to be 10 years. One thing I really wanted to just say is that Cheyenne did not make it. Cheyenne struggled with addiction related to being trafficked for many, many, many years before Joseph Hazley. But Cheyenne came to court and she gave justice to Desiree. She was terrified. She told us everything. After trial, we lost touch with Cheyenne. She did succumb to her addiction. I believe she was using substances to cover up all of the awful things that happened to her. She is no longer with us. Gina is doing very well. She's just a great human too, who came and testified. Very hard for them to come forward and tell their truth, but she did an amazing job. I wanted to just say that one of the reasons that I ended up leaving the FBI is I believe that I can do more good out of the FBI now. I want to continue my advocacy for victims. I want to continue to be sure that people understand the dynamics of sex trafficking. I have no more favorite thing than going into a courtroom where I testify blindly and as an expert about the dynamics of sex trafficking and how this can happen to the average citizen who gets selected for a jury who doesn't understand and they've seen the movie Taken, or they think that it's rescuing someone from a basement. I can only think of one case that I had where somebody had been restrained in such a way. It is a mind manipulation. It is preying on the vulnerabilities of youth and young women. Although I have worked cases with boys, 99.9% of my cases were with young women, which is why I reference that. Nobody deserves this, and nobody deserves to be told, which is what traffickers do, is that no one will believe you and you are broken now. You are not worth anything to anyone. And that's why they don't come forward. And they're so ashamed when they do. You have to have a special prosecutor. I was so lucky to have so many fantastic prosecutors over time that got it, that understood, that treated these victims with grace and dignity. There were moments where it was very difficult and people didn't understand. I think it's a real disservice that we do putting people in the position to work these investigations. We cannot put people in those roles and voluntold to do so. It has to be that you have the passion for it, that you want to do it, and that you're going to fight for these victims, because a lot of times people believe that they are the throwaways, and what we don't need are other agents or law enforcement officers thinking the same. I attribute a lot of the negligence and neglect in these cases to just lack of education on what this is. Our acceptance in society of sexualizing and exploiting people.
I know that for working the child predator innocent images cases, my understanding is that there is some type of counseling or checking in to make sure that the person working these cases receives the right training, and then also is monitored to make sure that they're handling the stress of working these cases. Is that the same when it comes to sex trafficking?
I would like to say that it is. I will tell you that I had the opportunity on two separate occasions where I was offered a after action, or I don't even know what they call it now, to be honest with you. Basically like, hey, let's all get together and talk about how hard this case was. And they brought in counselors and services. That was not until my last 5 years in the FBI. And so for the other duration of the time, it was go along to get along. Don't tell anyone you're bothered. I told multiple people I was really struggling, and they said words to the effect of, don't tell anyone that. They're going to tell you can't work crimes against children anymore. Don't tell anybody that you aren't sleeping. Don't tell anyone that you cry a lot. Don't say that. They'll take you off this case as a punishment. And I thought, this is wild. I have so many friends and so many incredible agents that I have worked with that have become my family. We've all heard FBI family. And I'm like, this doesn't sound very much like family. If you're telling me I can't be affected by something, it is very unusual for an agent to work for 21 years on crimes against children. But I became obsessed, and I would tell big bosses, SACs, never move me from this squad. And SACs who would say to me, Carrie, you don't have to worry about us moving you. You're good at it, and no one else wants to do it. I have a husband who is an FBI agent who says every day, there is no way I could work what you worked. I don't say that as a matter of ego or anything, but I truly believe that I had that ability. I think what happened to me with my ex-husband, I really think that I was made for this.
It empowered you.
It empowered me, and it empowered me to not allow for this on my watch. Although I know it's happening, that's where a lot of guilt comes in and walking away from the FBI. People are like, why are you having such a hard time with retirement? Well, because I still had pending cases. I still have questions about cases that I no longer have a voice in. What's happening with those cases? What's happening with those victims? Although I still have close relationships with people at the FBI, that's no longer my business. I have to respect the need to know. I have to respect the fact that I am trying to move on and do other things that I can help to contribute, like helping with this back page efforts for victims and testifying to help in other cases where case agents have done an amazing job. And I can come in and say, listen, jury, you've got to understand this for what it is. And please don't believe what you see on the movies and what you might not understand. This is how this is and how this operates and works. And the functionality of then being able to have a part still in the process and a part where I know that I can still contribute. I will share with you, Jerry, I had a really tough child abduction case where, thank God for good friends and prosecutors and people around me and my family. I was struggling with drinking red wine so that I didn't see what I couldn't see anymore. The little boy was murdered by his parents. I watched torture video after torture video, and I couldn't go to sleep at night without using alcohol. It took my 11-year-old daughter at the time to say, you got to find a different way to deal with this. I didn't tell anybody at the FBI. I was afraid to, because we don't do a good job at that. We don't do a good job of taking care of people. And back to your very original question of, is there a program? There is now that they're putting in place, knowing full well. It's called a resiliency program. I've spoken at it. I'm pretty mad about it, that it's taken until 2025 to have something like that exist. It makes no sense to me. My main source of help and assistance of any kind was through my partner of 16 years, who happened to be a behavioral therapist before the FBI. How awful to unload all of my trauma onto him, who's already dealing with his own. We had each other. I mean, that's the bond that we created, is like, no one will ever understand what we've seen. We never wanted to go home and talk about it. My husband, I didn't share my work as much at home because I had a partner to deal with that. He's an FBI agent working in large part alone. And so I would come home on weekends and I would say, I don't care what happens. Do not say the 3 letters. I don't want to talk about the FBI. I don't want to hear about the FBI. I don't want to go to any events related to the FBI. I just want to sit on our back porch because I had just had enough. And it was too much. I didn't realize it until my hair fell out. My hair fell out from the AJ friend case. I was essentially bald in the back of my hair. I told no one. I went to get an assessment to see what was wrong with me. I told people I was doing that. They told me, don't ever tell the FBI. Don't tell the nurse. If they prescribe you medication, they might take away your gun. I was so scared. And yet, here we are, this helping organization. And I was terrified that I would be let go because I said I needed help. The day I retired, I went back to the very same therapist and got my results from the 8 years before of going to say I needed help, and got on a medication. And I feel way better than I did. It doesn't take away all of the trauma. People say, oh, you should talk to a therapist. I don't want to talk about the things that I've seen. A case like this, of course, because I want the educational piece to be out there. I don't want to remember some of the things that I'm forced to remember. So why would I want to talk about it? I say all that to say we need to do better. The Crimes Against Children unit is a very tight unit. I don't know what's happening today. It sounds like it's being very much taken apart and we have other priorities in place. But the people that I worked Crimes Against Children with are the most dedicated, resilient, and phenomenal humans. What they see and what they have given up for their own families. I used to say that my own daughter will probably end up a hot mess because I've spent so much time focused on other kids. My daughter had to take a back seat to that, but she has become such a advocate. She sings every year at the human trafficking gala. And when asked why she does that, she said, my mom has dedicated her whole life to this. If I can sing at a gala to help promote help for these victims and get money for this non-government organization, then I'm going to do my part. I never told her to say that. She's heard enough. I say I didn't want to talk about my work at home, but I'd always talk about the victims. And I'd be like, you would love this girl. She's so funny. She said this, she said that. And I'd ask my daughter for help a lot too, because she's 17 now. And I'm like, what does this TikTok mean? What does this thing mean? How do I interpret this Snapchat? What are these words? It made me a better agent having a teenage daughter. I also think that's a God thing. I didn't think I was going to have children. I was just going to work crimes against children. She was a lovely surprise. I have only one child. I think God knew that I needed somebody to shepherd me and guide me in this fight.
Wow. I haven't said a word, I don't know in how long, because what you're saying is so powerful. My question for you now is, when did you retire and what are you doing? I mean, it's still such an emotional toll on your soul. So what are you doing to relieve some of that personal emotional stress that you're obviously still experiencing? And let me add to that, I've had the tissues out the entire time. There are people that are listening that are not only listening to what you're saying, but they're experiencing it. What do you say to them? Because they may be afraid to seek help too. I think we both know the reality is that you can't do this alone or with non professional people to talk it out with.
Yeah, I think a couple things. So I retired in September of 24. I think one of the worst things that I did was jump right into another career. I really am enjoying, I work for Ford Motor Company now. The thing I really like about them is that they are very much pro my continuing my efforts with the human trafficking world, which I love. They are a philanthropic organization that say, we'd like you to still give back to your community. And so I'm still doing presentations and different things. We get 16 hours a year paid to do that. I give big kudos to Ford for that. They know that I have my own LLC and that I am trying to also get that going. I think one thing I really have a hard time with is just like the guilt of leaving the victims behind. And so I'm really working a lot of hours, my hours at Ford, and then the hours related to this so that I can continue change. One thing that I've been able to do is I joined Spenga. It is strength and conditioning, biking, and yoga all combined into one class. And I do that 5 days a week. That has helped me so much in just having something for just me and having time to do that. I do it at 5 in the morning most days, and then I start my day after that. It has been a good, healthy release of a lot of what I've been thinking about. I really miss my friends at my squad. I was in an RA for 19 years. They became closer than family. I spent way more time there, and I have not been back to the office yet. And July 31st, my husband is helping with a barbecue at our office. My intention is to go to that barbecue, but I tried to go to the Christmas party and I cried the whole way there and wondered, what have I done? Why did I retire? I saw a lot of changes happening that I was not agreeing with, a lot of dissection of squads related to crimes against children, a lot of services that no longer were in existence, a lot of people burnt out and no help being given. I just couldn't do it anymore. I think it's one of the best decisions I made, the hardest decisions. I feel like my job at the FBI was not only the coolest job I've ever had, but the happiest I ever was because every day was different. Every day I met the most incredible people, even as frustrated as I would get. Even as upset as I would get, I still had my core group of people, my crimes against children people They checked on me so many days after the AJ Friend case. They were helping me with this case with Desiree from afar. A child abduction case that I had, a Detroit agent, Mike Glennon, is helping me figure out what vehicle was used because it was a Ford vehicle, which is so ironic that now I work for Ford. What I need to do more of is take a breath and realize that I can take some time for myself. My daughter plays softball. I went to Colorado last week to watch her. We're going to California to watch her play softball, and then she'll be headed to Louisville after what is now her senior year. She's going into her senior year, and I just think about all the time Yvonne, who doesn't get to experience Desiree's senior year. That's what really is hard sometimes when you think about how lucky you are and how much sometimes we take things for granted. I want to be better about that. I owe a lot of apologies to my family because I put the FBI before everything, and I know that I did, but they know why. My own daughter said to me so many times, Mom, it's okay, go. They need you more than I do. It's okay. That's a lot to deal with, but I'm trying to come to terms with that and try to be present now and try to attend things. For the first time, I was able to make every single high school softball game because I would just say, I'm leaving at 4 and I'm going, and there is no missing kid and there is no traffic kid right now that I'm responsible for. I was on the child abduction rapid deployment team, and I always felt like I was waiting for the other shoe to drop. Jerry, you asked about help that we can get. The child abduction team is supposed to have days off after an abduction. We were unaware of that. The policy was not clear up until about 2 years ago. Nobody told us that that was afforded to us. So you would go out to a deployment, you would recover a deceased child. The expectation was that you were back on your squad the next day working, no matter what. Even if you hadn't slept in 6-7 days, that was the case with AJ Friend. The expectation is that I went back to work and we got him out from a shallow grave, hunted for him for 7 days, interrogated people for 30 plus hours. There was no break. And so I think you become robotic and you're just like, well, this is my life. This is the way that it is. We have to do better. I don't have answers for that. I'm not sure that the current administration has answers for that since we're cutting everything. But I know that I have a lot of friends suffering. I have a lot of friends who have seen way more than I have. And I can't even imagine anybody who has seen more than I have. But we are bonded together through a unique set of circumstances. And I have my own LLC. I'm doing the expert testimony. I'm assisting law firms in fights for victims, in fights for truth and justice. I'm working still with Chris Parenti, my favorite prosecutor, which has really helped me to put this all full circle of you can still work with the people that you enjoy working with and care about and who have become your good friends. I always thought that once I left the FBI that would all just go away. That has been super healing as well. I have to say, I had the best experience and then some of just the absolute worst days. And yet I would not change any of it. I had people who thought that I had inappropriate relationships with victims, that I got too close with them, and that it affected cases. I had squad mates who thought that we were working the wrong violation and that there was just no purpose in this. I had all the missing flyers of the kids and pictures up. Yes, in some of the photos, they may appear promiscuous and a lot of makeup or dressed inappropriately. People would say, why do you do what you do? Why do you put this before everything else? We're out on a gang drug buy and then you come back here for 3-4 hours to continue this. And these girls go right back to these traffickers. They didn't understand. One of my most favorite stories is the starfish story. That's the little boy on the beach who is walking along and sees all these thousands of starfish washed up upon shore. As he sees these starfish, he starts throwing them in one by one. An older man comes by and he says, "What are you doing?" And the little boy said, "I'm throwing these starfish into the water so that they survive. If we leave them up on the shore, they're just going to die. And the sun is going to cook them and they'll no longer be alive." The man said to him, "Look at all of these starfish, son. You cannot possibly make a difference. there's no way you're going to get all of these starfish back into the ocean. And the little boy picked one up, threw it in, it swam away, and he said, well, it mattered to that one. That was kind of my mantra and my philosophy for working crimes against children is I couldn't get to every case and I couldn't get to every victim. And we had so many cases where victims were outliers that we couldn't identify. But I always thought that if one of those victims were reminded in some way that they mattered, then we did our part. That's why I really love that starfish story. It became a part of what I believed in every single day and would share that with nearly every victim and survivor and every prosecutor I worked with is we're frustrated, we're up against all of these different issues, but this matters. Every prosecutor that I worked with that I loved and anybody who kind of touched my life, I would give a starfish picture and card or a keychain of a starfish. I know that I couldn't save every victim in the Chicagoland area of sex trafficking. It is not lost on me that there's probably people that think I'm crazy. It's not lost on me that I feel crazy at times. And it's not lost on me that people probably think I have a big ego about this. I don't. What I had was just a drive and a passion to make sure that if I could touch the life of one person to let them know that I believed them and that they mattered, then I did my part. And people did that for me. So I had to pay it forward. That's one of my most favorite movies is Pay It Forward because too often we take, and we don't give. I will tell you, when I left the FBI, I just was beat up and I was beat down. People telling me no to cases. Oh, there's not enough victims. Who says that to people? Well, we're not going to take a single victim case. So she's not worth it. So he's not worth it. Okay, then. Oh, well, we have finite resources. I was lucky in my career. I did 3 years as a 30-day temporary duty assignment with the Attorney General, Merrick Garland. I was on the protection detail for 30 days, and it was some of my most incredible experiences, not because I got away from crimes against children cases, because I took them all with me and did that work while I did the detail. But I met some of the most incredible people, Merrick Garland being one of them, who had such a love for crimes against children and really understood what we were up against. One of my best friends, Mike Langeman, my mentor, when he got walked out of the FBI related to the Larry Nassar investigation, that is when I felt like this can happen to anyone. He is the epitome of an FBI agent, and it was all to save face in front of Congress. It was someone needing to give an answer, and he was the scapegoat. And I know that to be true because I know him as a human, and he was the most incredible crimes against children agent I have ever worked with. That, Jerry, broke me, and I just lost faith. If you do what's right, you still can lose. He lost his pension. He lost his character and his name. He's still fighting to put it back together. I worked more sex trafficking cases with him in 10 years where victims called him day and night and loved him, that there is no way that what they accuse of him is anything that he did. I can say that firmly now, and I had to sleep with that on my mind and in the shadows because that was the biggest travesty that I saw in our Crimes Against Children unit in the whole time I was there, not to mention the lack of mental health services provided to us. But I love the FBI, and so I don't want this podcast to portray that I don't, because there is nothing I loved more than serving my country and being able to have such an incredible, outstanding career with the people that I loved and cared about.
What I'm hearing is that if you had received the support and counseling that you needed, that you desperately wanted, that you would probably be still at the FBI today.
Yes. If our unit would be given the resources that other violations are given, that's one thing. We used to be able to go to the Dallas Crimes Against Children conference, and it was as much of a time of learning and the current trends and the fantastic presentations. You wanted to hang out all night with your friends that you had a bond with across the country and go to class. People might say, oh, yeah, those trainings are boondoggles. We needed those trainings to decompress, to be with one another who got it. And they removed that process about 10 years ago, and they'd pick one from every office to go. And then they'd send all the people that are sitting at headquarters. It's like, you're not even in the field. What do you need to go there for? That kind of stuff just sent me over the edge. They need to know that this is breaking people. And there are plenty of agents who have struggled, who still struggle, agents who have committed suicide that nobody talks about. Yet the trauma that we get from these cases and vicarious trauma is incredible. And yet no one offers that to us. They will come back now and say, well, we have a wellness, it's called a resiliency program. It's a Band-Aid that is funded from HR, not even the Crimes Against Children unit. Human Resources funds it because they know they are up a difficult battle if they don't do something. It is a fix it.
We need to end this with a call to action.
Yes.
If you were made in charge of all funding for the FBI and all administration of how services can be provided, what would you like to see happen immediately?
What I would like to see happen immediately, if I was put in charge of the budget and or the Crimes Against Children unit, is that we have allocated resources across the entire field to sufficiently articulate the need, and an assessment taken of cases coming in that we have to turn away and give to other agencies and say no to, then determine the body count for that related to how we can respond. I would like to have a full training program for new agents, middle of the road agents, long-term agents that addresses not just current trends and how to investigate these cases, but a training program that includes mental health assessments, true mental health assessments, not safeguard, not a program that people can lie about, a true full-on assessment where you can be truthful without being punished, where you can receive the necessary services. I also would ask that the same amount of money is allocated to the Crimes Against Children unit that is articulated as a need to Congress, and that the money is not foregone to some other division when convenient and when somebody above decides that we don't need the money. Crimes Against Children unit. I also believe that there has to be an ounce of grace given to agents working these violations, and that they should be afforded time to process these things without that information being siloed. Apparently, there is a program where you can go with your spouse for a week and no one tells anyone about it. I learned about it through the FBI Agents Association. Every agent should know that that is afforded to them. It was too late in my career to even have a date to be able to go once I learned of it. I think agents are so busy who are doing the real work that we don't have time to sit and find resources on the internet. We should have victim specialists in every office that help agents, not just the victims, that they're there to provide resources to the agents and to support staff. I know I have focused largely on agents. I had the most incredible support staff that transcribed my transcripts of victimization that have been affected just as much and ask me every day, how do you think AJ's little brother's doing? How is Yvonne Ambrose doing? What is going on with this person? And everyone forgets about the support staff. It's not just us out there in the field. It's the diggers and the finders and the analysts who are providing us with all of this to even put the pieces of the puzzle together. The biggest call to action also would be educating the public. We have to get the community to understand that with the generation of AI, that we are going to be in a whole different world with the victimization and exploitation of young children. We have to get in front of that because the bad guys are always a step ahead. And if we don't evolve, the bad guys will evolve faster than us.
Well, guess what, Carrie? You just did that.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
not only is it an opportunity for others to hear about Desiree in these cases and all the cases that you worked, not only is it an opportunity for the public to hear about the mental health sacrifices that not just FBI agents who work these cases, but all law enforcement and investigators who work these cases go through. I have to say that it appears to be an opportunity for you to finally have your say about what you've gone through and to voice your frustration of not being able to say these things while you were still in the FBI.
I agree with that. I've been a good soldier. Those that know me closest know of my frustration because of it's a word I don't always like, but my passion and dedication to the craft. I also feel like I was held back because I couldn't, from a hierarchy, systemic issue, I'd never got to the right people. Merrick Garland knew of my frustration. I wanted to tell him so much more about what was going wrong. There is no room for mistakes for crimes against children agents. There is no room for error. That burden for me at the end was I felt like I had to document if somebody winked at me. My last 3 years, I worked no fewer than 19 hours a day so that I could document every single thing that happened because I didn't want someone to accuse me of something I didn't do. I think this was healing for me actually too. And it's the first time I've been able to be really brutally honest with somebody who has full transparency and knowledge of the FBI. I was very careful with confidants and people that I thought really cared about me at the FBI, but I've never really said all of this.
Well, I am honored that you felt safe enough to talk about that.
I think some of the stress culminated by going from case to case to case. I went to trial as a case agent 17 times with crimes against children cases. Many agents in their career don't go to trial one time. The difference with sex trafficking cases is that oftentimes the trafficker rolls the dice and takes the chance that the victims are not going to be strong enough to come forward. And so they generally don't take a plea that's offered. And oftentimes there aren't pleas offered because of the absolute destruction that these types of cases cause. My partner and I would end one trial and not recover from all of the trauma that these victims had faced and then the vicarious trauma. And we'd be right back preparing for the next trial. That part just exhausted me. And the absolute, complete ingratiation to the U.S. Attorney's Office and being a good partner with your prosecutors requires you to be there 24/7, interviewing and preparing and holding the hands of victims. And there's just never a break. It was interesting to watch because other violations didn't have that. They might prepare for a trial and yes, it's a RICO case or it's a gang case, and not saying those are less important, but it didn't have the trauma always associated with those cases.
Wow. I never even thought about it that way.
Yeah.
I really appreciate you sharing your heart, your emotions, your soul about what it was like to work these cases and the effect that it had on you, that residual trauma that you talked about. We are at the time of the episode where I like to learn a little bit more about your origin story. I'm going to ask the question of when and why you joined the FBI.
I joined in August of 2003. It was around 2001, kind of when everybody else applied because of the 9/11 event. I applied, but I got a response that said, you really need to get a master's degree in order to be competitive, which was interesting because I knew a master's degree wasn't required. But so many people had wanted to fight for their country in the name of justice. And so there were a lot of applicants. I enrolled back in college and got my master's degree in a year and a half. I got my master's degree in criminal justice. At the time, I had gotten my bachelor's degree in criminal justice. I was working at the corrections facility. My boss at the corrections facility was in charge of the criminal justice program at the college at St. Ambrose University. He was a fantastic mentor to me. He really encouraged me to take as many classes as I could and get it done as fast as I could, knowing how much I wanted to get into the FBI. He's like, look, I'll help you every step of the way. We will get you to where you need to be and then just reapply, which was kind of cool knowing that I could have stayed working for him and we had a great friendship. He was a fantastic boss and professor, but he knew what my dream was. And so I felt like he really pushed me along in that.
Oh, that's fantastic. We can all use mentors and people who are in our corner. That's wonderful.
Absolutely. My applicant recruiter called me and it was before cell phones. I know that sounds so crazy. He left a message on my voicemail machine and said, just so you know, this is Richard Holmquist. You passed phase 2 and we will be sending you a conditional offer letter. I was so shocked and I thought, it's April 1st. Who is pulling my leg? It's April Fool's Day.
Was it really?
It was April Fool's Day.
Wow.
I did not call the number back. I thought it was a friend that was playing a trick. So I waited for another call and he called and Richard Holmquist was retiring the next week. And so he said, I had to get you into this academy class. I can't believe you didn't call me back. I was still shocked. And he said, what makes you think you wouldn't be exactly who we want for the FBI? My why is probably a couple of things. My father was a court reporter. He's retired. And I was fascinated with the court system. So I always thought I wanted to be in probation, parole. I knew that I wanted to be working with kids and protecting them and was very interested in sex trafficking cases. It's something that I hope I can continue.
You have all of this passion. I know you said you weren't sure about that word, but you have all of this passion, all of this knowledge, all of this experience. You've been retired for less than a year. What are you doing now?
I own my own LLC. It is called Landau and Associates. I am providing expert testimony to prosecutors when trials come up in these cases to explain the dynamics of sex trafficking to jurors and to the court. I also am working with different law firms and groups. I'm on the advisory board for a non-government organization called Reclaim 13 that helps victims of sex trafficking, the same organization where my daughter sings at the Human Trafficking Gala. I am working with some law firms in some separate investigations. I work full-time for Ford Motor Company as the regional security director. I do all this other LLC stuff on the side when I'm not working for Ford. They are a huge advocate for philanthropic work and are proud of the past career that I had and wanted to allow for that to continue. I'm really enjoying starting my own business. It's a lot of work. It has been a passion of mine to continue these efforts. I just hope if I can do anything, it is to continue to educate the public, protect victims, and help to identify truth and justice for those who have been exploited, and also to protect those who have been accused of exploiting who may not have participated in that. I'm also looking at some of those things. I have a lot that I want to do. I'm just so thankful that you had me on your podcast as a part of continuing to educate the public about this very tragic and yet real topic.
I like to give my guests the last word. What would you like to say?
Thank you for listening. If you ever believe you have an opportunity to help somebody who is in a situation that you don't know anything about, please have a judgment-free perspective and understand that no one can understand what someone else is going through unless they've been there. Be good to each other and please look out for one another.
And that's the end of the interview. I recently spoke to Carrie and she's doing great. Not only did she attend the office's July barbecue, just this month she went to a memorial golf outing. In your podcast app's description of this episode, there's a direct link to the show notes at jerrywilliams.com where you'll find photos of retired agent Carrie Landau, as well as a longer bio for her, and links to case-related articles and images of Desiree and her mother Yvonne Ambrose. There is also a link to FBI Case File Review episode 249 with retired agent Masayo Halpin about human trafficking and commercial sexual exploitation. I hope you enjoyed the interview and that you'll share it with your friends, family, and associates. You can show me just how much you liked it by buying me a coffee. There's a link in your podcast app's description of this episode, or you can visit jerrywilliams.com and tap on the little coffee cup icon in the bottom right-hand corner of my website. Don't forget to follow FBI Retired Case File Review on your favorite podcast app. Now, this podcast is all about true crime, but if you're also interested in crime fiction, once a month via my reader team email, I keep you up to date on the FBI and books, TV, and movies. When you join my reader team, you get access to my FBI reading resource, a colorful list of more than 70 books about the FBI written by FBI agents who have been guests on this podcast. There's nonfiction, crime fiction, true crime, and memoirs. You'll also get my FBI reality checklist where I debunk 20 cliches about the FBI and receive news about what I'm up to and about my FBI nonfiction and crime fiction books. I want to thank you for listening to the very end. I hope you come back for another episode of FBI Retired Case File Review with Jerry Williams. Thank you.